Hey everyone, and welcome to the fourth video in our Beholding Jesus mini-sermon series, looking at Jesus from his betrayal to his arrest, his sufferings in custody, crucifixion, death, burial, and ultimately this is all leading towards the glorious day when we'll celebrate the resurrection with him on Sunday. I hope you've learned something, and I hope the Lord has been speaking to you through this. Where did we leave off yesterday? We left off with Pilate sort of giving in to the will of the Jewish people and the Jewish religious leaders. Their voices prevailed, it said. They shouted, "Crucify him!" And Pilate released Barabbas for them, because that was the custom, to release someone at the festival or someone in custody. They shouted to release Barabbas, a true murderer, a true insurrectionist. They chose for Pilate to release Barabbas and to keep Jesus in custody, to see Jesus crucified. And the last verse that we read was, he released the man, this is Pilate, he released the man, Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. So this is where we now pick up. And as they led him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene who was coming in from the country and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of the people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. But turning to them, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" So here we have Jesus making his way to the place where he is going to be crucified. And if you notice there, they grabbed this guy named Simon, who is from Cyrene, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross. It would be the cross beam, to carry it for Jesus. Now, normally, the person that was going to die, the crucified one, would carry it themselves. But obviously what we see here, and what Luke doesn't actually explicitly say, but some of the other Gospels do, is that Jesus had suffered what most people suffered before crucifixion, and that is scourging and flogging, where the Romans would take a whip and they would have chunks of bone and metal on it, and they would whip the person that was going to be crucified. And you can just, I don't even want to get into the details. You'll imagine what happens when you whip someone with chunks of stuff on it, when you pull it back. Lots of blood loss, lots of issues. I was even reading that sometimes in crucifixion, people would just die of shock and blood loss, right? Jesus was physically unfit to carry this beam of wood. Now, sure, it would have been heavy regardless, but most people could probably suffer with it and carry it. Jesus could not. They had to grab someone else, and the Roman authorities had that authority to pick anyone and say, hey, you help this prisoner take it, this crossbeam to the place of crucifixion. So this just gives you a picture of Jesus. Here is our King, our Savior, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, who has condescended into human form, took on the likeness of human flesh, became a man like you and me, and he has suffered so deeply that he can't even carry his own cross. And then you have this kind of strange discussion, you could say, conversation that Jesus has with these mourners, these daughters of Jerusalem, these mourners that are mourning for him. And what Jesus basically is saying here is, okay, I understand you're mourning for me, but mourn for yourselves. It's sort of this judgment on the people of Israel, and really for anyone who refuses to recognize and acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah. It's really just this kind of judgment, this woe, like mourn for yourselves, weep for yourselves. The days are coming when you're going to be calling on, things to fall on you because of the judgment of God. Let's keep going. Verse 32, 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him, This is the King of the Jews. Verse 39, one of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. I think it's important to see that Luke twice notes that the two others were criminals, right? Back in verse 32. These two others who were criminals were led away. And then again in verse 33, they went to the place of the skull. There they crucified him and the criminals. And I just think that's important to see, that Luke is emphasizing the fact that Jesus is not a criminal, and yet he's in the midst of these two criminals. This shows, again, the innocence. It declares the innocence, just like Pilate was declaring the innocence of Jesus. Here again we see Luke emphasizing Jesus is holy, Jesus is blameless, and yet he's going to the cross. And where we really see the heart of Jesus shine forth is when Jesus is there and he says those words in verse 34, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." I mean, imagine being Jesus in this time, I know he's the second person of the Trinity, but I mean, as a human, you'd want to justify yourself. And yet here he is on the cross, unjustly on the cross, by the way, right? And yet he says, "Father, forgive them. Forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. Forgive them." Like that, just, you see the heart of Jesus, his compassion for even sinners. Romans 5:8, this is, how we see God's love, that he died for us while we were still yet sinners, right? This is the love of God, that he can look upon these that are putting him on the cross unjustly and say, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." What else is important here is, it seems like there's this rhythm of three, right? We saw the three declarations of innocence from Pilate. We saw the three denials that Peter made of Jesus. And now we have three times where, in kind of a scoffing way, people are looking up at Jesus on the cross and saying, "Save yourself." We saw that in verse 35. The rulers, "Save yourself." Again, the soldiers in verse 37, "Save yourself." And then one of the criminals next to him looking at Jesus saying, "Save yourself and me." And I think it's powerful as I was thinking about this. Here's Jesus who could save himself. I don't remember which gospel it is, but at one point, Jesus, I think, confesses, if I wanted to, I could ask the Father and he could bring down a legion of angels to, help me here. Like, that's not the issue. I could very well save myself, but the reality is this. He is going to the cross. He is drinking the cup of the Father's wrath, not to save himself, to save you and to save me. 3 times, "Save yourself, save yourself, save yourself." The whole time, though, Jesus says, "No, no, no." Isaiah 53, "I'm here to be crushed for the iniquities of the people, so that the people may be forgiven, so that the people might be saved." What love, what wondrous love is this? That's the song we sing, right? What wondrous love is this that we see the Son of God give right here in his moment of greatest need. So we have that prisoner in verse 39, "Save yourself and us." And then in verse 40, "But the other," so the other prisoner, right? There's 2 prisoners. "But the other prisoner," the other one, "rebuked him, saying, 'Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we, indeed, justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds.'" So this other prisoner is saying, look, we're suffering here because we deserve it. We are criminals, right? We deserve this. But then this man says in verse 41, "But this man," referring to Jesus, "has done nothing wrong." Boom. Declaration of innocence one more time. His holiness, his blamelessness shines forth. Verse 42, verse 43, "And he said, 'Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.' And he said to him, 'Truly I say to you,'" Jesus said to this criminal, "'Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.'" This man, this criminal, at the last moment of his life, he sees 2 things. He sees, number 1, he sees who Jesus really is. He's the holy and blameless one, righteous. The second thing he sees is that this Jesus is not just this guy that doesn't deserve to be crucified. He's a king. "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." He sees the authority of Jesus. And for this faith that he gave, to Jesus, Jesus looks at him and affirms forthrightly, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And what's powerful is this, that without this death that he is suffering, this criminal will not be able to be with him in paradise because he's a criminal. And yet through his death, He pays for the consequences for this criminal and for anyone who looks upon Jesus in faith, seeing him as the holy and righteous King of the world who sacrificed himself for us. Tomorrow, we will get to the death and burial of Jesus, and that will finish this series, and then we'll celebrate on Sunday.